Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I would normally tell you where we'd be preaching next week, but everything's gotten canceled last week, this week, and the next week. We were going to be in Los Angeles, and then we were going to be at Reims, Paris, France. All those got canceled, but we'll start back up. I know what an interesting time to be having end-time events. We're coming to you each week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war. Something even happened this week that points to that. Because the rapture of the church is signless, but the second coming has tons of signs. So we'll get into the things that happen around Israel so that we can tell exactly where we are in time. Remember, Jesus rebuked them, the crowd. He said, you don't know what your hour of visitation is. He said, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of visitation. He rebuked the Pharisees many times, but the only time he rebuked the crowd was over not knowing the time. So we have so many things that pointing to the coming of the Lord. It's absolutely amazing. So let's pick up with what's happened this last week. Obviously, number one, the coronavirus is the number one thing happening. It seems like it was being curtailed a little bit. Now it looks like it's growing a little bit more, so it may take a few more weeks for it to max out. But it's wonderful that we don't have to be concerned. Remember, we talked about it last week. The law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus makes us free from the law of sin and death. Talked about John Lake when the plague was killing everybody. He walked around, no problem. They said, why aren't you and your nurses dying? He said, well, put the bubonic plague on the microscope and I'll show you. And he touched the edge of it. But it didn't happen by accident. He would look in front of the mirror and say, God lives in this man. And when God lives in you, it's an overwhelming presence, like the Mount of Transfiguration. His skin couldn't contain that life. It began to come through his eyes, began to come through his hair. It's a kingdom that knows no defeat, knows no equal. And that's what's dwelling on the inside of you. So the more you focus on that, the more of a dominion mentality you have. But let's pick up, I guess England wants to be involved a little bit more than normal, but let's pick up what's happened around Israel this last week. Several things that are pretty interesting happened. You had Iran moving their bases from Damascus all the way into Syria, into Aleppo. Basically, they sent all their anti-aircraft equipment stuff there. Literally, this is what the report was from the Jerusalem Post, building up its presence for more missiles to come from Iran into Syria so they can get them to Lebanon. Crazy. I mean, to blatantly talk about the purpose of Iran's army being in Syria is to bring in missiles so they can annihilate Israel. I mean, you had Iran this last week. One of their leaders, Rouhani, basically talked again, just like he did a couple months ago, like he was losing his mind. Everything he said was an absolute, complete lie. And Iran even turned down assistance from the United States on the coronavirus. So get ready for more to happen there, because this is the thing that happened that really points to the Ezekiel 38 war. You had Turkey amassing a thought pattern to invade eastern Syria. Now, you've had Turkey come up with false ideas to invade Libya, false ideas to invade Idlib. They said they were going there to help the refugees. They caused 900,000 refugees. So Turkey's doing basically what we all thought would happen right before the Ezekiel 38 war, that they would be a player in pulling Russia down there. Now, Turkey's not doing this without Russia's non-approval. Russia has approved of all this. So you have that weird alliance that Ezekiel 38 talks about, the nations that will attack Israel right after the rapture of the church. In Israel, you had Netanyahu try to come toward Gantz so they could form a government. Gantz turned him down. The speaker of their Knesset is not obeying orders, so that he was stepped down. So it's absolutely crazy. It looks like there might be another election in Israel. But you have things happening with Hamas down in Gaza. They got mad because Israel was closing mosques. And then Hamas, the Palestinians got mad at Hamas for opening the mosque. So it's one thing after another. This was the one thing that intrigued me, was the Palestinians in Gaza threatened Israel. If Qatar and Egypt didn't pay they kind of pay them a monthly allowance. It's quite a bit of money. If they didn't get their monthly allowance, they were going to fire missiles into Israel so that Israel would have to go to bomb shelters so the coronavirus would spread all over Israel. So people are using coronavirus as a threat as well. So it's absolutely crazy. This is the one thing I wanted to get into, because many more things are happening around the globe. You had an earthquake in Zagreb. You had Yellowstone. They're talking about this strange concern with Yellowstone erupting in Wyoming. Many more things. I don't even get into all the earthquakes. Don't have time to get into all that. But this was the one thing everybody keeps going, we're in the tribulation. Well, no, you can't be in the tribulation, because Paul wrote to the church at Thessalonica about this very thing. He said, don't worry, I'm writing to you about the rapture of the church so that you be happy and hopeful. They thought they were in the tribulation. Nero was killing so many Christians that Paul had to write that letter to them into 2 Thessalonians and say, hey, you can't be in the tribulation because the church is still here. The Antichrist can't be revealed until the church departs. The word departure there is the word apostasia. The root of that word is the exact same root in Latin that Enoch departed before the flood. So if a departure from the faith would have brought the Antichrist, he would have come during the Dark Ages. Paul talks about you can't have the Christ and the Antichrist here at the same time. So the very first seal that opens up after the rapture of the church is the Antichrist. So you can't have that seal opened up until we depart, because we're the restraining force. Actually, you have so much authority that God can't do what he wants to do until you depart. Amazing how he gave the church all authority. It's weird how segmented it is, but it really is. Really, if you want to get super detailed, in Daniel 9, God told Daniel was wondering why they were in captivity for 70 years, and Gabriel tells Daniel, hey, you get another 490 years. They were supposed to let the land rest every 7 years, and they didn't. They fudged for so long, 490 years, that God let them go into captivity for 70 years to pay the land back. So then Gabriel goes, hey, don't worry, God's given you guys another 490 years. So that Gabriel said one of the most precise verses in the Bible. He said, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem till Jesus comes would be exactly 483 years. Jesus come riding in on that donkey exactly 483 years after that. But Gabriel told them, you guys get another 490 years. So Jesus came after 483. God promised them 490. He owes them 7 years of old covenant time. It's for the Jews and for Jerusalem. So that's what's getting ready to happen. The earth is being set up for that 7-year period that God's going to pay them back those 7 years that he owes them, and Jesus will be able to present himself to his brethren just like Joseph did. So let's pick up with all the other signs. So much more is going on. We're not in the tribulation yet, but it sure seems like it, but we're not. But number 1, Israel made a nation. Number 2, Jerusalem won back. After that, you got the Hebrew language restored. Ethiopian Jews brought back, fertility of the land of Israel, revival of the Roman Empire. You have 172 different species of predatory birds showed up in the land of Israel. You got the cleanup crew in Israel right now. You had fish showing up in the Dead Sea, foxes showing up on the Temple Mount. Crazy. You had the ritual baths around the temple fill up with water 2 times in the last month. Amazing how all the things are ready for the Lord to come back. Many more signs. You have men will be lovers themselves with selfie sticks. You have really the things about Israel that are so blatant. They're all precise and also clear. The fertility of the land of Israel is one that's remarkable, that God said, I'll bless the land and it'll preach for me. And you'll see the physical evidence of the covenant. So those things are all so cool, but it's so sweet of the Lord to go sign after sign after sign. I hear people go, well, you can't tell when the Lord's coming back. Actually, you can if you can read. If you're driving from Tulsa to Dallas and it says 214 miles, next sign says 190, next sign says 150, next sign says 110, you know you're heading toward Dallas. The signs show you you're heading toward this event called the coming of the King. Amazing. Everything in the book is about Jesus being revealed at the end here as the King. This is the season that the Son will be glorified and honored in all the earth. He was beaten and spit upon at the first coming. The second coming, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that he's Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So you have all these physical signs, and then you go to signals. You got blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles, 4 in a row. NASA called it a tetrad. When's the last time you had 4 in a row on Passover and Tabernacles? In 1967, when Jerusalem was won back. 1948, when Israel was made a nation. And 1492, the Edict of Expulsion, when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So you got blood moons on specific dates. You got the Bethlehem star this last year, first time in 2,000 years. You have many celestial events happening, talking about wormwood. Now NASA's coming out saying that it's going to do a flyby of the earth in 2029. It may not hit the earth in 2029. But the amazing thing is the Lord's so sweet to give us signs and signals, signs and signals. You've gone from signs to literally signals right now. All the nations that you'll see come against Israel in the Ezekiel 38 war have their setup right now. Notice Jordan. This is amazing. Jordan and Saudi Arabia became friends with Israel all of a sudden because, see, they're two of the nations that don't attack Israel in the Ezekiel 38 war. So the players are on the stage. Things are set. Jesus is about to come back. In the midst of all this turmoil, let's let Jesus shine. Let's lay hands on the sick and watch them recover. He said, you tell them when you get near them that the kingdom of God has come nigh unto them. So we have a wonderful opportunity to show mercy, show kindness, and try to help our neighbors, because this is a weird time to see what's going on right before the coming of the Lord. How privileged are we that we're about to see him face to face? I would pray, just as we know that Jesus is about to come back, would be sweeter, would be softer, would be kinder, would be easier to get along with. Let's show people Jesus, that he was raised from the dead, and so soon we'll see him. Well, what do? Help your local church, help your local pastor, because we're about to see the Lord. Let's go for it. Hey, thanks for joining us this week. We'll come back next week, and there'll be more things about what's happening around Israel and what's happening with the coronavirus. Jesus is about to come. Have a blessed, awesome week. See you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the EDU at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.